The US has imposed more sanctions on Venezuela than most countries see in a lifetime, but here's the kicker. American companies are still buying Venezuelan oil. Confused? You should be. Let's unpack this mess. Venezuela has more oil than Saudi Arabia, yet its people are fleeing by the millions. If you think the US only cares about democracy and human rights, well, let's just say there's a bit more to this story. So you've probably heard about Venezuela in the news. Protests, economic collapse, political drama that makes reality TV look boring. And through it all, the United States seems absolutely fixated on this South American country. But why? Most people think it's about spreading democracy or fighting socialism. And sure, that's part of the official narrative. But the real reasons the US is obsessed with Venezuela are way more complex, way more interesting, and honestly, way more cynical than you'd expect. Today, we're counting down the 10 real reasons behind America's Venezuela obsession. And trust me, by number 1, you'll see this whole situation in a completely different light. Let's dive in reason number 10, the geographic sweet spot. Let's start with something simple. Location, location, location. Venezuela isn't just somewhere far away. It's literally in America's backyard. We're talking just a few hundred miles from Florida, sitting right at the top of South America. For the US, this proximity is everything. Think about it like this. You might not care what your neighbor 3 blocks away does with their lawn, but if the guy next door starts hoarding explosives, yeah, you're paying attention. Venezuela controls key shipping routes in the Caribbean. It's a gateway to South America, and historically, the US has had this little policy called the Monroe Doctrine, which basically says Western Hemisphere is our hemisphere, everyone else stay out. So when instability or foreign influence pops up this close to home, alarm bells start ringing in Washington. Plus, with millions of Venezuelan refugees now scattered across Latin America and making their way north, this isn't just a them problem anymore. It's a us problem. Geography matters, folks. Reason number 9, oil. So much oil. Okay, let's address the elephant in the room. Or should I say, the oil barrel. Venezuela has the largest proven oil reserves in the entire world. We're talking about 300 billion barrels of crude oil. That's more than Saudi Arabia, more than Canada, more than anyone. If oil were Pokemon cards, Venezuela would be sitting on a first edition holographic Charizard collection. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The US claims it doesn't need Venezuelan oil anymore because of the shale boom and energy independence, and technically, that's true. But here's what they don't advertise. American refineries, especially in the Gulf Coast, are specifically designed to process Venezuela's heavy crude oil. So even during sanctions, the US has granted exemptions to companies like Chevron to keep operating in Venezuela. Because apparently, principles are negotiable when your oil refineries are already set up a certain way. The US might not need Venezuela's oil to survive, but it sure helps keep things running smoothly and cheaply. And let's be real, whoever controls or influences Venezuela's oil wealth has serious geopolitical leverage. The US wants a say in who gets that power. Reason number 8, China and Russia are making moves. Nothing gets the US government more fired up than watching rival powers set up shop in its neighborhood. And guess who's been cozying up to Venezuela for years? China and Russia. China has loaned Venezuela tens of billions of dollars, mostly in exchange for oil. Russia has sold them weapons, helped them with military training, and even conducted joint military exercises. There have been reports of Russian bombers landing in Venezuela, just to flex a little. For the US, this is like watching your ex start dating your rival. It stings, and more importantly, it's strategic. The Cold War might be over, but the great power competition never really ended. It just changed locations. Having Russian and Chinese influence this close to American soil is a national security concern. It's not paranoia, it's just old-fashioned geopolitics. So yeah, the US is paying very close attention to who Venezuela's friends are. Reason number 7, the migration crisis. Let's talk about numbers. Since 2014, more than 7 million Venezuelans have fled their country. That's nearly a quarter of the entire population. It's one of the largest displacement crises in the world, rivaling Syria. And where do many of these people eventually want to go? The United States. This creates massive political pressure domestically. Immigration is already one of the hottest topics in American politics. Add millions of potential asylum seekers into the mix, and suddenly Venezuela's problems become a talking point in every election cycle. The US has to deal with the humanitarian aspect, the political aspect, and the logistical nightmare of processing asylum claims. Countries like Colombia and Brazil are overwhelmed. The ripple effects are real, and they're reaching American borders. So even if the US wanted to ignore Venezuela, the migration wave makes that impossible. It's forced engagement, whether politicians like it or not. Reason number 6, the drug corridor. Here's an uncomfortable truth. Venezuela has become a major transit point for drug trafficking. We're talking cocaine from Colombia passing through Venezuela on its way to the United States and Europe. With government institutions collapsing and corruption running rampant, drug cartels have found fertile ground. Some reports even suggest elements within the Venezuelan government and military are involved in the drug trade, either through corruption or direct participation. For the US, this is a double threat: drugs flowing north, and the instability that comes with narco-trafficking. The State Department and intelligence agencies are all tracking this. It's not just about stopping drugs, it's about preventing Venezuela from becoming a narco state that exports violence and addiction. And let's not forget, the US has spent decades and billions of dollars fighting the war on drugs in Latin America. Venezuela becoming a safe haven for traffickers undermines all of that effort. So yeah, obsession justified. Reason number 5, ideological battle, socialism versus capitalism. Now we get into the culture war stuff. Venezuela's government, especially under Hugo Chavez and now Nicolas Maduro, has branded itself as socialist, anti-imperialist, and anti-American. Chavez loved giving speeches denouncing the US, calling American presidents devils, and positioning Venezuela as a beacon of resistance. For American conservatives and many centrists, Venezuela became the poster child for socialism gone wrong. Politicians love pointing to Venezuela and saying, "See? This is what happens when you go to far left." Whether that's a fair characterization is debatable. Venezuela's crisis is the result of corruption, mismanagement, and authoritarianism, not just economic ideology. But nuance doesn't win political points. So Venezuela isn't just a country to the US. It's a symbol, a cautionary tale, a talking point. And when something becomes symbolic, people get way more invested in it than they otherwise would. Reason number 4, the humanitarian argument and its complications. The US government officially says it cares deeply about the Venezuelan people suffering under an authoritarian regime. Hyperinflation, food shortages, medicine shortages, political repression. It's all real and it's all terrible, and to be fair, there are genuine humanitarian concerns. People are dying from preventable diseases. Kids are malnourished. Political prisoners are being tortured. That's not propaganda, that's documented reality. But here's where it gets messy. Critics argue that US sanctions have made the humanitarian situation worse. By cutting off Venezuela's access to international finance and limiting oil sales, the sanctions have strangled the economy even further. So you have this weird paradox. The US says it wants to help the Venezuelan people by pressuring the government, but the pressure tactics hurt the people too. It's the classic sanctions dilemma, and it makes the whole "we care about Venezuelans" argument feel a little hollow to some observers. Still, the humanitarian angle is a real part of why Venezuela stays in the headlines and on the policy agenda. Reason number 3, regime change dreams. Let's just say it, the US wants Nicolas Maduro gone. That's not a secret. American officials have openly recognized opposition leader Juan Guaido as Venezuela's legitimate president, even though Maduro still controls the country. There have been sanctions, diplomatic pressure, and even whispers of covert actions. Remember that bizarre failed raid in 2020 with former Green Berets trying to capture Maduro? Yeah, that happened. It was like a bad action movie plot, except it was real life. The US has a long history of involvement in Latin American politics. From coups to invasions to democracy promotion programs, Venezuela fits right into that pattern. Whether you think that's justified or imperialist depends on your perspective. But the point is, regime change isn't just something conspiracy theorists talk about, it's openly discussed policy. The US wants a government in Venezuela that's friendly, stable, and ideally opens up the economy to foreign investment. Reason number 2, domestic political theater. Here's a cynical take, but it's true. Venezuela is useful for American politicians. It's a bipartisan punching bag. Republicans use it to attack socialism and Democrats who support progressive policies. Democrats use it to criticize Trump's immigration policies or show their tough on authoritarian regimes. Everyone gets to grandstand, sanctioning Venezuela, giving speeches about freedom, supporting the opposition. It all plays well to different bases. And because Venezuela is far enough away that most Americans don't directly feel the consequences, politicians can take bold stances without much domestic blowback. It's geopolitics as performance art, and both parties are guilty of it. Venezuela becomes less about Venezuela and more about scoring points at home. Reason number 1, fear of losing control in the hemisphere. And here we are, the number 1 reason, control. For over a century, the United States has seen Latin America as its sphere of influence economically, militarily, politically. The idea that a country in this region could chart its own course, especially one that's hostile to US interests, is fundamentally threatening to American policymakers. Venezuela under Chavez and Maduro represented defiance. It challenged US dominance. It made alliances with enemies. It inspired other leftist movements in the region. Bolivia, Ecuador, Nicaragua, they all took notes. The US obsession with Venezuela isn't really about Venezuela itself. It's about maintaining hegemony. It's about sending a message, step out of line, and there will be consequences. This isn't about morality or democracy or human rights, though those are convenient frames. It's about power, who has it, who keeps it, and who challenges it. And that, more than oil or migrants or anything else, is why the US just can't let Venezuela go, so there you have it. 10 reasons why the United States is absolutely obsessed with Venezuela. And as you can see, it's way more complicated than good versus evil or democracy versus dictatorship. It's about geography, resources, geopolitical rivalries, domestic politics, and ultimately, power. Venezuela is a chess piece in a much larger game, and the US is determined to control how that game plays out. Does that mean the US is the villain? Not necessarily. Does it mean Venezuela's government is innocent? Absolutely not. The truth is messy, and both sides have plenty of blame to go around. But understanding the real reasons behind the obsession helps us see through the propaganda and the sound bites. And that's what critical thinking is all about. If you found this video eye-opening, do me a favor, smash that like button, subscribe for more deep dives into geopolitics, and drop a comment below. What do you think is the real reason for the US obsession with Venezuela? Let's discuss. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.